Welcome back, friends. Episode number 100, the century mark. My partner here, Tisdale's not with me today to celebrate this mark, but we do have a special guest in the studio, Sergeant C.J. Zimmerman. How are you, Sarge?
I'm good, thank you.
Great to have you here. Episode 100. We're trying to save something special for episode 100, and you took in a cold case, a very profound cold case that most people have probably forgotten, and opened it back up to a whole new level. And that's what we want to share today with the community is, first of all, who you are and what you do, but also the double initial murders, that investigation, where you're taking it's utterly incredible. So we're going to spend a couple episodes talking about that, but today we're going to talk specifically about why you opened the investigation and what it looks like, the uniqueness of this new look at it. But first, C.J. Zimmerman, who the heck are you?
Well, thanks for having me on.
Yeah, great to have you here.
I'm 55 years old. I've been with the department for 33 years. I got hired into the Jail Bureau in 1990, recruit class 13.
Wow.
And 1998, I came out onto the road. And I've had a very, very blessed career. For 5 years, I was an investigator. For the last 6 years, I've been a sergeant. And I've had a lot of opportunities with the department. And then personally, I'm married with 4 adult children. So,
way to mention the wife. Thank you. I would have had get a phone call.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
No, she's precious, and I've gotten to know her over the years, and just getting to know you better. We did the Unity tour together a few years ago, and heading all the way down to Washington D.C. and we had a ball on that. But recognizing our fallen down in D.C. is just a precious opportunity too. So. Yeah, you've been blessed with a wide variety of jobs. The jail is a great place to start for a deputy, isn't it? Or any cop.
It's the absolute best place to start, and that has benefited me so much on the road. I can't even tell you how much it's benefited me.
Yeah, knowing how to talk to people, right? Understanding de-escalation, all this stuff that's vogue now, has been done for years and years by good deputies inside the jail, right? Because it's an intense day-to-day operation.
Absolutely. And, we were talking just a few moments ago about the camaraderie in there.
Right.
It is just out of this world. I miss it. I miss that camaraderie.
Yeah, you rely on each other for 8 hours.
Yeah.
There's no backup.
Absolutely.
There's no backup coming. You're all by yourself. On the road, you click the mic and get the cavalry coming sometimes, right, from all different jurisdictions. But who comes to the jail for a backup?
Yeah.
So you got what you got. And then the road patrol, just watching your career over the years, I came on just a little bit before you, so we spent a lot of time together. But investigations, you're very good at it. And then now being a supervisor. But so we have these double initial murders, and it's a cold case. No cold case ever goes to sleep in any police department, including ours. But maybe they're not looked at with vigor. Maybe they're not looked at it with different points of view or whole new paradigms of how we're going to look at this investigation. That's kind of what you did with this. But how about first we just go over, these 3 beautiful ladies. It's been 50 years, right?
Yeah.
That we lost these young ladies, these girls, the double initial homicides. This is national news back in the day, and it's been brought back up a few times in the past. But you're taking it to a whole new level, this investigation. These young girls, their families will not be forgotten. That's the first thing I think is very important. We ain't forgetting them, and we're gonna seek justice even 50 years later. But how about just a little bit an overview of these murders?
Yeah. So. It all started on November 16th, 1971. And there was a 10-year-old girl by the name of Carmen Colon. And she had left her house. She was living with her grandparents over on Brown Street. And she had left her house, and she was going 2 blocks down to Jack's drugstore to fill a prescription for her daughter, or for her sister, I'm sorry. Mm-hmm. While she was in the pharmacy, having the prescription filled, she had told the pharmacist, I gotta go. And she looked kind of amped up a little bit as she was described. And then she left the pharmacy, and that was at 4:30 in the afternoon on November 16th, 1971. Wow. And then she was abducted. It was 2 days later on November 18th that her body was found just off Stearns Road, about 16 feet off the shoulder of the road. It's the town of Riga. Mm-hmm. So, and I'll mention it now. It's the actual physical town of Riga. It's the mailing district of Churchville, the fire district. I'm sure there's another area that, the mailing district. But she was found on the side of the road. She had been sexually assaulted. She had been strangled from the front manually with hands. And she was found partially clothed. As the investigation started to spiral up, there was an aspect of this case that was very sad. And that was at 5:30 in the afternoon, 1 hour after she was last seen, Carmen was seen. It was 490 westbound, just east of exit 3, the Churchville exit. Okay. There's a pull-off there. I don't know if you're familiar with it.
Yeah, like a little truck stop type thing?
Exactly. Yeah. Carmen was seen partially clothed, running towards traffic.
For the love of God.
And a vehicle was backing up with a man getting out and pulling her back in the car. You know, and I've read a lot of information on that. And this was at a time before cell phones.
Right.
And there were dozens and dozens of people that drove by this and saw this. And I've heard a lot of commentary over the years about why didn't they stop? And I think that given the total context of it, there's a lot of times where the mind sees something and it just doesn't compute, or you kind of write it off as saying that's an errant child that's getting away from dad. Or,
right.
So it's just a sad event.
Wow.
That's what it is.
That's utterly incredible. And in today's episode, this is going to be a 3 or 4 part episode because we got so much information, 3 or 4 episodes in this series, if you will. We're going to concentrate on Carmen because that's a sheriff's office investigation because she was found in our jurisdiction. And there's other jurisdictions involved in the subsequent murders. So we'll talk to those people, but we'll spend more time on Carmen. But maybe just a quick overview of the next 2, and then, like I said, we'll take a deeper dive into Carmen in a second. But just to put the context of the double initial murders.
No, absolutely. So Carmen Cologne, C.C.,
Right.
and she was found in Churchville, basically, right. C. 17 months later, on April 2nd, 1973, which the 50th anniversary has just passed, Wanda Walkowicz. Wanda was 11 years old. She went missing. She had left her house on Avenue D. She was en route to a grocery store. She was seen at the corner deli, and she went missing. And then the very next day at 10:15 in the morning, a New York State trooper had pulled off on the rest stop, 104 West, just west of Bay Road, just east of the Bay. There's a pull-off there. He pulled off, and he looked down, and Wanda Walkowicz was deceased. It looked like she'd been thrown from a car. She had been sexually assaulted, and she had been strangled from behind with a ligature, a belt, or something. A trooper had found
Right.
her. So that became a New York State police investigation.
Okay.
And then 6 months later, a little girl, Maenza. Michelle was 11 years old also.
Wow.
And she went missing. She was actually walking home from school, and she was on Webster Avenue, and she was last seen on November 26, 1973. 2 days later, she was found in Wayne County in Macedon on the side of Eddy Road. So that investigation became a Wayne County Sheriff's investigation. So really is what we have here is we have 3 unsolved cases, 3 little girls, 10, 11 years old. They were all sexually assaulted. They were all strangled. None of these cases have been solved. 3 separate agencies investigating each of the cases. And then, just to add another element to it, all 3 cases originated in the city of Rochester.
Right.
So all 3
Another
cases
jurisdiction.
were missing persons investigations that then turned into homicide
Right.
investigations.
Right, and not only their initials, their names, but the locations that they're found could play in there, right, as a commonality.
Yeah, that's another commonality, and that is what has garnered a lot of national attention, media attention, is Wanda Walkowicz was found in Webster. Michelle Maenza was found in Macedon.
Right.
Carmen Cologne was found in Churchville.
If you will, yeah.
If you will.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you can see the water tower from that truck pull-off, I believe. It's utterly incredible. So that investigation, obviously, after 2, I'm sure, then 3, just a full court press and the coordination and communication and the national news, like I said. But over the years, they grow cold, right? And they end up in a file cabinet with, a tickler, if you will, to open them back up every so often, depending on your general orders and your jurisdiction. And so they sit there almost 50 years, if you will, with no real intense work, maybe a little less than that, but you know what I'm saying, decades. And then you come along with this great idea to let's look at some commonality. But now I know you're a humble guy, but we just look at before we go into the investigation you're opening, I mean, let's just look at the commonalities and what's similar and what's different. I mean, there's some things that are different in these. Like you mentioned, one girl was strangled one way and the other 2 girls. But I just got to point out that, my wife grew up on Love Street, literally right around the corner from Carmen at the same time, and she didn't have a double initial name, but boy, this is I can't imagine families, what they were going through there, the terror in the community, the utter terror, especially if you have kids with 2 initials that are similar. I mean, this had to be incredible back in the day of terror and a want for solving this thing, holding justice.
Yeah, absolutely. And especially, after Wanda, it definitely upped the ante. But then 6 months later, Michelle Maenza.
Right.
And there was a full court press. And if you look at the old media footage, it is just amazing how many people in the community were just really scared.
I think we got some video of the old police crime scene being investigated here, and we do it quite different nowadays, by the way. But it's just amazing.
Yeah, and you were talking about the similarities. If you don't mind, I'll just talk while you're rolling this. You have 3 girls, ages 10 and 11. Mm-hmm. All 3 of them were, the double initials, first of all. That's first and foremost. They were all walking on foot. They were all relatively close at home. They were all in the city of Rochester. They're all from basically broken families, from economically depressed areas.
Wow.
All three abductions happened late afternoon, 4:30, 5:30, 3:30. And then the fact that they were all abducted, they were all strangled, they were all sexually assaulted, and then the fact that their bodies were, for lack of a better term, dumped out in the suburbs or rural areas. The similarities are just amazing. They really are.
So as you look at that, what are the differences? I know we talked about, you do a complete investigation. That's you and your team are thorough. So you look at all the information. I mean, are there differences in this?
Yeah, there are definite differences. As far as Carmen Cologne goes, she was strangled with the hands from the front. Michelle and Wanda were strangled from behind with a ligature, possibly a belt or something like that. The sexual assaults were different.
Okay.
Carmen's was a little bit more aggressive than Wanda and Michelle's.
Gotcha.
There was food found in the stomachs of Wanda and Michelle, yet none in Carmen's. So there are definite differences. And then if you want to get into you could look at Carmen was abducted on a Tuesday. Michelle and Wanda were both abducted on a Monday. So there are differences that we've definitely been aware of, and they've been out there in the media for many years now.
That's fascinating. I hope the listeners and people watching this are, first of all, keenly aware of how in-depth your knowledge of this investigation is from 50 years ago and how personally you're taking this thing. That's incredible. That's a statement for a sergeant with 30-some years on law enforcement. You sound like a rookie digging into your first investigation. You know every nook and cranny of this thing. You know everything. It's incredible.
Well, honestly, just to get into the investigation a little bit, 2016, I was an investigator, and I was said, okay, CJ, you're going to be the case agent for this investigation. The reality is is that I had many other investigations to tend to. So is what would happen was every month, every other month, I would get a call, a tip, a lead, and somebody would call in and say, hey, I think my father is a double initial murder suspect.
Right.
So is what I would do is I would go out, and it's been in the media for probably 15 years now that there's genetic material on file.
It's fascinating.
There's DNA. So
That's good police work 50 years ago.
yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah, that's good police work 50
Thank
years ago. They
goodness.
secured it. Yeah, amen.
And, throw an attaboy to the state police because they're the ones that got it.
Oh, darn it. No, I'm only
I know.
the inside joke is the troopers don't need to be prepped up there.
I was strictly reactive.
Right.
I was, once a month, I would respond to somebody's house. I'd swab them for DNA.
Right.
I would send it in, and it would come back negative. And I want to be clear, this plan or everybody for years, and hundreds, if not thousands of cops have been involved in this investigation.
Wow. That's a great testimony.
And everybody has pretty much had the same feeling long before I joined this case, and that was that we generally believe that the killer's name is somewhere in the case files.
Wow.
Now,
That's a
why?
profound statement.
I remember you asking in a meeting, why? Why do you think that?
Right.
And quite frankly, it's because there are well over 10,000 pages of documents. There are thousands of names, numerous people that have been interviewed. The chances are that the killer was interviewed is pretty good. So, it would be wonderful if we could just go out and swab every single person for DNA and then compare it. But that's not practical, it's not realistic, it's not possible. A lot of these theories are theories that have been held by many other cops, many other investigators
Right.
ever since the beginning of this case. Over 50 years, this case there have been flare-ups, so to speak. Dennis Termini, he was a suspect, and everybody really liked him. And then January 1st, 1974, he was in a foot chase, or our Rochester police were in a foot chase, and Lynn Johnston, who was a
Captain
past
Johnston.
captain,
Yeah.
was actually chasing him on foot, and Dennis Termini got into his car and killed himself. He was always liked for the homicides. And then in, I think it was 2007, investigator Pat Crow, a prior investigator with the Monroe County Sheriff's Office, wrote a search warrant. They exhumed his body and checked him for DNA, and it turned out he was not the killer.
Amazing.
But there have been other flare-ups, too. The Hillside Stranglers,
Right.
Kenneth Bianchi and Angela Bueno, they were eliminated. And then there was Joseph Nasso in 2013. He was a serial killer out in California and Nevada.
Right.
And he was eliminated as a suspect. So there have been numerous flare-ups over the last 50 years.
And that's the beauty. I mean, people just keep on pushing and thinking and putting a hypothesis out there. The other day, you're doing a briefing, and I'm literally on a napkin doing Arthur Shawcross. Where was he when he was released from Watertown for the murders there? And he liked water. Little boy, he murdered a little boy and girl, right? So, and ironically, the last young lady that was murdered, Artie was accounted for, right? But I was like, man, can you imagine just? And that's the idea. Just keep this thing going. I mean, somewhere there's that idea that, like you're saying, somewhere in that case, that package of thousands and thousands of documents might be the name. And that's kind of where you're going with this investigation, right? That's the step here. We're putting a lot of time and energy into, and you formed one hell of a team to come around. You formed a team of volunteers, which I think is very cool to look at this too. So maybe you just want to go a little bit into, what is your overall strategy in the investigation right now?
So a lot of things lined up really well. Number one, I switched assignments and I became the administrative sergeant about 2 years ago. And I then, in January of 2022, I went to my captain in CIS, and let me back up a little bit. As far as the case file for the Carmen Colognes, 3,300 pages of documents. Yeah. Okay, and you see the stack right here.
Right.
Those case files had been pawed through for 50 years.
Right.
And it was an old system, an old records management system that they used from 1971, how these reports were all filed.
Right.
Well, now it's 2022. And I always, as an investigator, when I got this case, I always thought, man, I would love to be able to organize this case in an updated records management system.
Right.
But I never was able to because I didn't have the time. Mm-hmm. January 2022, I went to my captain. And I'll tell you, in the old days, I would go to the captain, I would pitch an idea,
right.
I would then be met with 50 questions, and then he would run it up the chain of command, then it would come back down
right.
with all sorts of other questions, and by the end, it would all be watered down.
Right.
I'm very, very grateful because I went to the captain and I said, hey, I would like to organize these case files. And I think that this case, there is potential. There is hope
right.
that we can solve it because we have DNA and because we think the killer's name is in this file. Maybe not these files, maybe the New York State Police files or
right.
the Wayne County files. And I would like to get a deputy assigned to me
right.
full-time, and I would like to give him this task. It was amazing. He asked maybe 2 questions,
right.
and he said, do it.
God bless. Good.
And then I got Deputy Mike Houlihan.
Yeah, and you got a round peg, round hole.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And he was the first addition to the team.
That's great.
So as far as the investigative strategy, the very first step was, I sat down with Mike and I pitched him the offer. And I said, I would like to, Mike only had a few years on.
Right.
A brand new deputy, young kid. And I said, I'd like you to read over all 3,300 pages of documents.
All, nothing.
Then I want you to organize them.
Right.
And I want you to organize them in this new records management system.
Right.
And then I want you to, every single time you come across a man's name, I want you to write it down. And then I want you to create a complete and absolute table of contents for all 3,300 pages. And you have to read the reports that are faded. You have to read cursive.
There's a skill we lost.
And Mike was like, okay, gladly I'll do it. And I was amazed. And then, I got him an office, and the office was the investigator's locker room with no windows. I grabbed a couple tables from home, set them up,
right.
and put him to work.
God bless.
It took him 6 to 8 months, and he got the entire case organized. Because here's the bottom line with any investigation, the very first thing you have to do is you got to get all your records organized.
You gotta organize.
And then you need to read every last thing.
Right.
So I'll say this. Mike Houlihan is the subject matter expert when it comes to the Carmen Cologne case. He is the case agent. All I am is the sergeant that is providing resources and just making sure the train is moving forward. That's it.
Well, Sarge, it's utterly incredible to watch you grab a young deputy to put vigor in this investigation for justice 50 years later, to recognize the great police work that was done 50-some years ago, that the troopers, were tenacious enough to grab that, if you will, DNA before DNA was a thing. I mean, think about that.
Yeah.
That was before DNA was a thing, but they understood principles of investigation and preservation of evidence. And those things may very well, by the effort of you, the state police, the RPD, the Wayne County Sheriff's Office, and a lot of good detectives before this investigation, you got it. And now as it unfolds, that's quarterbacking, and that's incredible. And that's what we're looking for here in law enforcement, is to bring people to justice, and we'll never forget those families. And I think if anybody hears anything that are related to these 3 beautiful young ladies, is no one's forgotten them, and we'll keep on pursuing justice every day.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
This is going to wrap up episode number 1. You can see already why we probably need 15 episodes to go over this case. We haven't even gotten into Carmen. You know, we want to get really deep into that, and we will. And then in future episodes, we'll talk about the investigations of the other young ladies, and then we'll bring it all together as we wrap up this series. But first of all, your knowledge, your ability to build a team is utterly incredible, and I just want to emphasize that for one last time. I know you're a humble character, so it's bugging the heck out of me to keep on saying your name. But someone had to pick it up and run this forward, and to build a team of trusting you to come on board that train with you is pretty cool, too. That's good.
Thank you.
Absolutely. So we're going to cut it right there. I got hours and hours left to interview you. We promise the audience we'll keep these short. We'll keep them 30 minutes if at all possible. And we'll come right back. As soon as we get these other folks to interview, you'll help me interview them. And let's see how we can develop maybe the 3 investigations and see how they coordinate together.
Sounds good to me.
Thanks for all you're doing. You're bringing justice to people, hopefully. And nothing we like more as cops is to lock up bad guys, right? And
Absolutely.
can you imagine someday it's just a dream of ours? But we'll go where the evidence takes us. I mean, that's the principle of Investigation 101. We never go anywhere else, just where the evidence takes us.
Exactly.
Amen.
And solve it.
Amen. So thanks for all you do, CJ. Thanks for everything you're doing for these families and in our community as a whole. And you're a good person. And I look forward to sharing more about the team you built.
Thank you.
Absolutely.